Senator Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if this question's already been asked. I'm ranking member on another appropriations committee this morning, and so I had to divide my time here. But this is a question I asked the Air Force when they were here and the Navy Marines when they were here, and that is that the nearly $500 billion reduction in spending on national security assets that you are working through now, which results in a considerable drawdown of Army personnel and perhaps procurement and other essential areas, is tough enough. But the prospect of an additional nearly $500 billion under the Budget Control Act sequester, which has not yet been addressed for any kind of change. I just want, for the record, to get your assessment of what the impact of that would be. And I go back a little ways. I remember shortly after Desert Storm 1, being with then Defense Secretary Cheney, saying, you know, if you go back through history, at the end of a major deployment or conflict, we've always drawn down too far, and drawn back up is always puts us in a very difficult situation. And I couldn't help but write down the quote that General Amos, Marine Corps Commandant, said. He said, "History has shown that it's impossible to predict where, when, and how our military forces will need to be called upon." And so I'd just like, for the record, to get your take on this particular budget-driven drawdown, and we all want efficiencies and effectiveness and saving funds given our debt situation, but also the potential impact of this sequester if it's not adjusted.
Thank you, Senator. If I could, I'll start and then turn it over to the Chief. With respect to this budget, these were tough decisions and tough numbers to make. We had to, I think, come down in a place that puts us on the edge. But nevertheless, on balance, I think all of us feel across both the combatant commands as well as the service chiefs and service secretaries that this is a reasonable fiscal plan, and most importantly, it does reflect the requirements under the new national military strategy. We're very concerned about any changes to that because it is a delicate balance. The Chairman and I had a brief discussion about how our end strike numbers are very finely tuned against our other budget lines to make sure that we have the readiness, the modernization, training, family programs that are necessary not to keep us on the path to going hollow, as you mentioned, that happened in other post-conflict periods. As the sequestration, I think the Chief and I both agree it would be devastating. For the Army, and I'll let the Chief talk about the actual numbers to our current end strengths, but it will cost us another $134 roughly billion. I can't count for you the number of acquisition programs that would be placed into Nunn-McCurdy breach, simply because while the fiscal impact is hard enough, we have no opportunity under the budget law to manage it. It is simply an across-the-board cut against all appropriation lines, requiring us to buy a half of an MRAP, if you will, or requiring us to abandon all kinds of acquisition programs that I think would be chaotic, not just for the military, but would be chaotic for our industrial partners who obviously have stockholders and have employees and would have to lay off. I don't venture an exact figure, but I suspect thousands and not tens of thousands of employees. So unlimited negative impact should that happen.
Chief, you want to add to that?
Senator, if I could, I would just say I want to make sure that people understand that this first $487 billion cut is not an easy cut. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I talk about the razor's edge, and the razor's edge is the fact that we have to balance end strength with our modernization programs, with our readiness. And it's a very, very careful balance. And my guess is we'll have to continue to refine and adjust this as we move forward. If we get another additional $500 billion cut, as the Secretary said, it frankly will change how the joint force looks. And so we're going to have to reevaluate and take a look at what do we want our joint force to do? How do we want to accomplish our national security objectives? Specifically to the Army, it translates into approximately 100,000 additional end strength cut, combination of active, National Guard, and reserves. But more importantly, is it would require us to cut more steeply in 13 and 14, which in my mind puts at risk the force responding in Afghanistan and to the current commitments we have, and puts at risk how many of our leaders that we would have to lose that have the experience and capabilities that we will need in the future. So it's not only the size of the cut, it's the fact that they would require it to happen more quickly. They would require it to happen without any thought. It's an even cut across all component of all MDEPs within our budget. So the risk is extremely high in my estimation, extremely high, and would be devastating to us.
Thank you. Second question I have, assuming I have it, do I have any time left, Mr. Chairman? Just help me get a little bit of understanding on where we're going with the vehicle fleet in the future. I know that the decision has been made to recapitalize Humvees to a significant extent, and there's, I guess, money. I think there's money in the budget for that. But the decision between the MECV and the JLTV, can you just give me your thinking behind, or where you are now, and some of the thinking behind that? I mean, I raise that partly because, and correct me if I'm wrong, the JLTV is a much lighter, more mobile vehicle than the MECV. Am I correct in that?
It's really the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle is really there to replace the Humvee.
Yeah.
It's a Humvee replacement.
But the MECV is being terminated, or at least in the budget terminated.
Right,
I get the rationale behind it.
Well, I would say that we're looking at a combination of our whole wheel fleet, as you just kind of brought up. And what we're going to, the JLTV will purchase about 1/3 of the amount of Humvees we have now. We're still going to depend a little bit on Humvees through our recap and reset program. We will continue to do that. We had to look at what we thought we needed across the force as we move forward. You know, we've purchased a significant amount of MRAPs, so we're trying to integrate what's the number of MRAPs we want to keep in the force, what's the how many new JLTVs do we need? And the reason the JLTV is so important for us, it gives better protection than the Humvee, it's lighter, and it's network integrated. So it's, in my mind, it's a significant upgrade to the Humvee. So I think it's a combination of all those things, a mixture of the MECV, the MRAPs, the Humvees, the JLTV, and we're trying to get the right mix. And with the budget constraints that we have, we believe the right mix was a combination of JLV Humvees and then using some of our MRAP capability to fill the needs in that category of our truck fleet. We're also doing an analysis of our truck fleet, and we're probably going to reduce the number of trucks we have in the total fleet as we reduce the force structure and as we relook how we developed our requirements for the truck fleet. And we're taking a look at that as well as we move forward. And we'll continue to refine and assess this and provide you updates as we move forward with this over the next couple of years.
My concern dates back to, again, early in the 90s when we thought the light tactical vehicle was the cat's meow. I mean, to get around in urban situations and so forth. Well, this is before IEDs came such a challenge for us, and so then there was a lot of armoring that went on and so forth, and you know all the history of that and so forth. So I guess my concern is that we end up back in a situation where we're under-armored
Sure.
and our troops are more vulnerable, and that's really the heart of my question.
Senator, it's a great question. And the challenge that we have, whether it be in our light vehicles or even in our infantry fighting, any vehicles we develop now, it's this dynamic of mobility versus survivability. And what we're trying to do is, what I would like to have is a system that enables us to adjust survivability based on the environment, so we have a choice on how mobile we can be and how survivable we can be. And the example I always use is the Stryker vehicle. Our Stryker vehicle was built to provide us more mobility. But what's happened is we've had to put so much weight back on the Stryker, we've lost the mobility that we first wanted on the Stryker. Mm-hmm. And so it's okay in an operation like Afghanistan or Iraq because of the counterinsurgency and how we use it. But in other environments, we're going to have problems with it now because it's so heavy and its ability to get off-road is a problem. So what we're looking for is the right balance. And that's what we're trying to get with the JLTV. That's what we're trying to get with the GCV, is that right balance of mobility and survivability. And we're working very closely with all of our partners to try to achieve this.
And then just one last question. I mean, is this, do we have any problems with the industrial base in terms of all this remixing of priorities?
It is, we watch it very carefully. And we have to make sure that we're able to sustain the industrial base as we move forward. And that's certainly, we're very cognizant of that as we move forward.
That's a component of the decision process.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
We discussed earlier, it's a big concern across all of our industrial base, both our organic but as well as our private industry partners. And we're working with the Department of Defense to try to ensure that we can do everything we can, whether it's foreign military sales, public-private partnerships, and assessing and locating our personal buys, our individual service buys in a way that sustains that minimum rate to the greatest extent possible.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Mikulski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.